This video is not a defense of the Bible. It's a defense of not being a total moron. I would argue that one of our main goals in life should be not to be total morons, and yet many journalists have apparently concluded that life's greatest purpose, the pinnacle of human achievement, is to be as moronic as possible. A few days ago, CNN tweeted, "Ancient Judeans ate non-kosher fish at a time when it was thought to have been prohibited by the Bible," according to a new study. The article they link to makes a simple argument. According to the Bible, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, God told the Israelites not to eat fish that don't have fins or scales. But archaeologists have found tons of bones of finless and scaleless fish at Jewish sites dating from 1130 to 586 BC. Therefore, the Bible must be wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, there are all kinds of ways to attack the Bible, but some of the ways that someone might attack the Bible are especially stupid. I would consider this argument especially stupid if it were being posted by a random, nameless atheist troll. But it's CNN, which means that CNN's reporting on the Bible is worse than what I would expect from a random, nameless atheist troll. And it's not just CNN. A few years ago, there were articles circulating that used the exact same moronic blunder, but with different ingredients. The articles declared, "Bible debunked, the ancient Canaanites survived God's wrath, scientists say." The argument here went something like this. In the Bible, Deuteronomy, God commanded the Israelites to completely wipe out the Canaanites. But modern genetic tests show that the Canaanites lived on. Therefore, the Bible must be wrong. Now, if you've actually read the Old Testament, that should sound like one of the most moronic arguments you've ever heard. Why are these articles so popular? Well, because most people haven't read the Old Testament, and so they don't realize how moronic today's journalists have become. If we read the Old Testament, here's what we find. In the Torah, there are commands that sound like they're calling for the complete extermination of the Canaanites. But these commands are used interchangeably with commands to drive the Canaanites out of the land. So there's a question of how to reconcile these commands. One way to reconcile them is to conclude that God is commanding the Israelites to drive the Canaanites out of the land and then to exterminate the ones who refuse to go. Another way is to conclude that the Bible is using what's called hagiographic hyperbole. Basically, in other ancient writings in the Near East, the authors used a form of hyperbole, or exaggerated language. They would describe military victories as the complete annihilation of the defeated group, even though the defeated group wasn't actually annihilated. It's similar to people today saying, "My team slaughtered your team," when no one was actually slaughtered. There are three main reasons to think that the Bible is using hagiographic hyperbole in passages that sound like they're calling for the extermination of some group. One, as I've already mentioned, the Bible uses the extermination commands interchangeably with commands to drive the groups out of the land, as if the commands are referring to the same thing. Two, also, as I've already mentioned, other ancient writings use the same form of hyperbole. They describe military victories as the utter extermination of an opposing group. Three, all of the groups that are supposedly exterminated in the Bible show up later in the same Bible narrative, which suggests that some rhetorical device is being used. These are some of the issues that come up if you actually study and try to understand what's going on. But even if you ignore these kinds of issues, even if you just read the text, what do you find? According to the Bible, were the Canaanites completely exterminated, or did they live on? A bunch of popular articles have claimed that, according to the Bible, the Canaanites were completely exterminated. What does the Bible actually say? Let's read one passage. Judges chapter 1, verses 27 to 33. "Manasseh did not drive out the inhabitants of Bethshean and its villages, or Tanakh and its villages, or the inhabitants of Dor and its villages, or the inhabitants of Ibleam and its villages, or the inhabitants of Megiddo and its villages, for the Canaanites persisted in dwelling in that land. When Israel grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not drive them out completely. And Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer, so the Canaanites lived in Gezer among them. Zebulun did not drive out the inhabitants of Kitron or the inhabitants of Nahalal, so the Canaanites lived among them, but became subject to forced labor. Asher did not drive out the inhabitants of Akko, or the inhabitants of Sidon, or of Ahlab, or of Akzib, or of Helba, or of Ephik, or of Rehab. So the Asherites lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out. Naphtali did not drive out the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh, or the inhabitants of Beth Anath, so they lived among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land. Nevertheless, the inhabitants of Beth Shemesh and of Beth Anath became subject to forced labor for them. So, pop quiz. According to the Bible, the Canaanites, A, were completely exterminated so that there were no Canaanites left anywhere, or B, definitely weren't exterminated. If you answered B, congratulations, you can read and understand words. If you answered A, congratulations, you're stupid enough to be a modern journalist who writes articles about the Bible. Speaking of morons, let's get back to a more recent example of the same blunder. CNN reports. After analyzing fish bones at many Judean sites dating to the Iron Age, 1130 to 586 BC, including at the Judean capital city of Jerusalem, researchers found a significant portion of non-kosher fish remains, such as catfish and shark. The team also found evidence of non-kosher fish consumption in Jerusalem during the Persian era, the point at which the laws were thought to have been compiled. Jonathan Adler, senior lecturer in archaeology at Ariel University on the West Bank, told CNN that he and his colleague Omri Lernow from University of Haifa in Israel wanted to use archaeology to pinpoint the exact time when ancient Judeans became aware of the Torah and started to observe it in everyday life. We have in two places in the Torah, in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, a prohibition against eating finless and scaleless fish, he explained. What we found was that throughout the Iron Age, there is no evidence that Judeans or Israelites were abstaining from scaleless fish, he said. So, God gives the law to the Israelites. The Israelites were commanded not to eat certain kinds of fish. But archaeologists have found that the Israelites did eat those kinds of fish. Hence, the Bible is wrong. What's the unstated assumption here? The unstated assumption is that if God gave a command to the Israelites must have followed it. Now, we could go almost anywhere in the Old Testament and see how that assumption is completely ridiculous, but let me ask those of you who've read the Old Testament. Pop quiz number 2. According to the Bible, after God gave the law to the Israelites A, faithfully obeyed the law right down to the fine points of the dietary requirements, or B, failed epically to obey the law. If you answered B, congratulations once again, you can read and understand words. According to the Bible, there were large periods of time when the Jews completely ignored the law or turned completely against it. But also, according to the Bible, even during the reigns of good kings like King David, the people still did a pretty terrible job of obeying the commands of the Torah. The message of the Old Testament is God gave a law, and then human beings disobeyed it in every possible way. This cleared the way for the new covenant. A Savior would come and save people from their failures. For some strange reason, journalists keep ignoring that. They prefer going to some command in the Torah, then pretending the Bible claims that the Jews faithfully obeyed the command when the Bible claims the exact opposite, and then declaring triumphantly that the Bible must be wrong. And somehow these journalists just can't figure out why people's confidence in the media has been plummeting for years. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, there are plenty of different ways to attack the Bible. If you're going to attack the Bible, try not to be a moron. Unless you're planning on working for CNN, in which case, better start killing some brain cells.